Saturday morning, 9:57 a.m. The sky over suburban Atlanta was pale gold, the kind that made glass storefronts gleam like promises. Outside a Living Well home store, sleek, polished, and full of light, a dark sedan idled. Inside sat Malcolm Reid, gripping the steering wheel like it held answers. No suit, no tie, no driver waiting to open the door. Just a black man in a plain gray t-shirt, jeans faded at the knees, and eyes that had seen too much success to still be this unsure. His company had grown into a household name, but lately, whispers were getting louder. Customers left feeling ignored, some hurt, others invisible. And there was only one way to know if the stories were true: walk in unnoticed. He wasn't here for applause. He wasn't here as Mr. Reid. Today, he was no one. Just a man returning to his own store like any other shopper stripped of titles, testing the soul of his empire. But what he didn't know was that in less than an hour, this quiet visit would expose a truth far more troubling than he imagined. And someone in that store would regret everything. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to be treated like nothing, in a place you built with your own hands, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that expose racist culture, silent power, and the fight for everyday justice. And so, with nothing but quiet resolve in his chest and truth in his steps, Malcolm walked in. The automatic doors slid open with a whisper, releasing a cool gust of air and the familiar scent of lemon-scented polish. Inside, the Living Well store was already humming with weekend energy shopping carts clinking, children giggling near display beds, and the soft jazz loop overhead reminding customers that this place was meant to feel like home. Malcolm stepped in quietly, his sneakers barely making a sound against the polished tile. He moved with intention, but without rush, like a man browsing, not watching. His eyes scanned the room slowly, but his expression gave nothing away. He passed a young white couple being assisted by an enthusiastic staff member, the employee's voice warm, posture attentive, even leaning in to point out product details on a mattress tag. Malcolm noted it. Farther down, two associates rearranged throw pillows in near-perfect silence, never once looking up. No one greeted him, no welcome in, not even eye contact. He drifted toward the electronics corner, pausing near a sleek end cap of Bluetooth speakers. His fingers grazed a glossy box. He lifted it gently, turned it over the same way any undecided customer would. He stood there, waiting. Just long enough. 20 seconds passed, then 30. The young man behind the counter, slim build, hoodie half-zipped, phone in hand, didn't look up. Malcolm turned the box again, louder this time. Still nothing. He felt it then, that old, familiar tension, the kind you don't name, but always recognize. It whispered not in words, but in absence. You're not worth noticing. He said nothing, just placed the box back with care. He wasn't here to make a scene. He was here to see who they really were when they thought no one was watching. Malcolm wandered deeper into the store, his hands tucked loosely into his pockets, eyes catching the details most customers would miss: chipped paint near the customer service sign, fingerprints on the fridge handles in the appliance aisle, a cart left abandoned beside a display of velvet stools. Small things, yes, but they spoke. He passed a display of designer cookware pots stacked like polished promises, and paused when he heard low voices behind the next aisle. Two employees stood leaning near a shelf of cutting boards, their posture casual, too casual for the uniform they wore. Both were young, both white, one with a baseball cap turned backwards, the other twirling a keychain around his index finger. They didn't see Malcolm, or maybe they did, and didn't care. That dude by the speakers, one said, jerking his chin toward the electronics section. He's just window shopping. People like that never buy the big stuff. The other chuckled. Nah, he ain't got it like that. Betty asks 10 questions and walks out empty-handed. Malcolm's hand tightened slightly around the edge of the shelf. He didn't move, didn't breathe too loud. He stared at a set of brushed steel knives like they held the script of his next move. They didn't know. They had no idea whose store they were standing in, whose name was stitched into the company's founding papers, whose sweat built the first showroom floor tile by tile. But it wasn't the insult that landed hardest. It was the ease of it, the comfort, the certainty in their voices, as if people like him, black, dressed plain, could be dismissed without consequence. He stayed still. Let them speak freely. Let the truth walk out on its own. Malcolm drifted away from the aisle like smoke, quiet, formless, gone before they noticed. He didn't turn back. What was there to say that he'd heard every word? That their laughter, muffled though it was, echoed louder in his chest than any insult spoken aloud. No, that would come later. For now, he walked. He passed a young Latina employee in the linen section who was straightening folded towels with care. She looked up, met his eyes briefly, and gave a small, polite nod, professional, but distant, not unkind, but not inviting either. At the far end of the store, near the checkouts, he spotted a black woman behind register 3, mid-50s, pressed uniform, afro pulled into a low puff. Her name tag read, Carla. She was scanning items for an elderly man, laughing at something he said about his old toaster that only toasts on one side. Her smile was real. Her tone was gentle, human. Malcolm slowed his steps, lingered nearby. He pretended to browse a rack of scented candles, cedarwood, eucalyptus, something named Winter Lake. He didn't need anything from that shelf. What he needed was to remember this moment. Because Carla reminded him of what living well was supposed to be: welcoming, warm, unassuming in its dignity. When the line thinned, she caught his eye and smiled. "Finding everything okay, sir?" He nodded. "I'm just looking. Thank you." "All right," she said. "Let me know if you need anything." Simple words, but said with care, with regard, as if he mattered. And for the first time that morning, Malcolm felt seen. But that glimpse of what could be only sharpened what had been. And now, he had a decision to make. Back in the driver's seat of his car, Malcolm sat in stillness. The hum of the engine was low, almost inaudible beneath the weight in his chest. He stared out at the storefront, his storefront through the windshield dotted with specks of dust and sunlight. To the world, it was just another polished space in a clean plaza, but to him, it was history, legacy, his blueprint come to life. And yet, what lived inside that building now felt foreign. He thought about the young man who couldn't be bothered to lift his gaze, the two employees so sure of their judgments, so casual with their cruelty. And then, Carla, the one flicker of what the brand used to be. The contrast gnawed at him. How had it gotten this far? He'd built living well from scratch, in his early 30s, with nothing but a rented van and 3 employees who believed in his vision. He remembered painting the walls of the first store himself, staying late to sweep the aisles, greeting customers by name. Back then, it wasn't just business, it was personal. But growth had its cost. More stores meant more layers, more policies, more distance. He picked up the small leather notebook he always kept in the glove box, opened to a clean page. He didn't write in anger. He wrote in clarity. Electronics section, complete disregard. 2 male staff, racial profiling, careless speech. Carla, integrity. Keep her, promote her. His pen paused at the final question. Because what needed fixing wasn't just one employee. It was a culture, and somewhere along the line, that culture had started to forget his name. The leather notebook lay open on the passenger seat, its ink still fresh, the words cutting more than any confrontation ever could. Malcolm sat back, shoulders pressed into the seat, eyes closed. He could hear his late mother's voice, low and steady in his memory. "You don't fix rot by repainting the walls. You tear up the floorboards and see what's growing underneath." He had been painting too long, hoping the company's name alone would keep the foundation clean. But culture wasn't a slogan on the wall. It lived in how people acted when no one was watching or when they thought no one was watching. And today, he had seen it firsthand. The disrespect wasn't loud. It was subtle, but subtle didn't mean small. He opened his phone and typed a message. "Brian, I'll be stopping by the Peachtree store this afternoon. Let's chat. Unannounced. For a reason." Brian Jensen, store manager, hired 3 years ago. Clean track record. But clean paper didn't mean clean practice, and Malcolm was no longer interested in spreadsheets and reports. He didn't want to be the kind of CEO who stayed high while rot grew low. Not when it bore his name. He closed the notebook gently, not like someone finishing a task, but like someone preparing for something larger. With one last glance at the mirrored windows of the store now reflecting nothing but sky, Malcolm shifted the gear into drive. He wasn't going to wait for someone else to fix it. It was time to walk back in, not as a ghost, but as the man who built it. The parking lot looked the same, but everything had shifted. Malcolm stepped out of his car with a calm that was not quiet. His posture had changed, not taller, but heavier somehow. Not from ego, from truth. He crossed the concrete toward the entrance again, the heat rising from the pavement like breath. The same automatic doors parted with their soft sigh. Same scent, same jazz. But this time, he didn't linger, didn't pretend. He walked straight to the customer service desk. A young woman glanced up from behind the counter, momentarily startled by the clarity in his approach. Before she could speak, Malcolm's voice, low and firm, filled the space between them. "I'd like to speak with the store manager, Brian Jensen, please." She nodded quickly and disappeared through the back office door. Malcolm waited, hands at his sides, not fidgeting, not posturing. Moments later, Brian appeared, late 40s, khakis sharp-creased, name tag shining just enough. His face lit up with the trained smile of someone who thought this was just another customer service matter. "How can I help you today, sir?" he asked, extending a hand. Malcolm took it, met his eyes. "I'm Malcolm Reid." Brian froze. Smile faltered. "The Malcolm Reid," he said, like the name had entered the room before the man did. Malcolm didn't blink. "Yes, I'm the founder and CEO of this company, and I came here today, unannounced. For a reason." Silence thickened between them, edged with recognition. Brian's posture stiffened. "If you have a few minutes," Malcolm added, "I'd like to share what I saw today in my store." And just like that, the rules of the room changed. Brian led Malcolm into the small office behind the customer service desk, fluorescent lit. Walls lined with laminated memos and a whiteboard that hadn't been updated in weeks. The air smelled faintly of coffee and carpet cleaner. There were 2 chairs. Malcolm didn't sit. He stood with his hands loosely clasped in front of him, calm, composed, but his voice held steel. "I walked your floor today," Malcolm said, as an ordinary customer. "No security, no heads up, just me." Brian nodded, uncertain. We try to maintain standards. If someone didn't assist you, I can absolutely follow up." Malcolm raised a hand gently. "This isn't about not being assisted. This is about how I was seen, or not seen. About who gets greeted, who gets judged, and who gets dismissed before they even speak." Brian's mouth parted, searching for response. Malcolm continued. "I was ignored at the electronics counter, not just overlooked, dismissed. When I asked a question, I was brushed off. When I asked again, I was told to read the box myself." Brian swallowed. "That's not acceptable." "No," Malcolm said, "it's not." But it didn't stop there. He stepped closer. His voice softened, not out of mercy, but gravity. "I overheard 2 employees mocking me, assuming I couldn't afford anything here. Laughing." Brian went still. Malcolm let silence fall, heavy, controlled. "Do you know what that tells me?" he asked, eyes unwavering. "That they didn't fear consequences. That they believed what they said was normal. Allowed." He exhaled slowly. Then, firmly, "That's not just a behavior issue, Brian. That's culture. And culture starts at the top." Brian's face had lost its polish. The trained pleasantries had faded, replaced by something taut beneath the surface worry, perhaps, or reckoning. I wasn't aware, he said quietly. We do regular check-ins. I thought. Malcolm didn't press. He didn't need to. Intentions don't build culture, Brian, he said. Accountability does. There was no heat in his tone, but there was weight, the kind that didn't ask permission to be taken seriously. I want to speak to the staff. Malcolm continued. Today. Right now. No announcements. No filters. Just people in a room, facing the truth. Brian hesitated. All of them. You mean everyone? Yes. Malcolm looked toward the break room door. Get them. Within minutes, the word had spread. Employees trickled in slowly, unsure. Some with name tags crooked from a long shift, others still holding their phones. The two young men from the kitchen aisle stood near the back, suddenly very quiet. The electronics clerk lingered at the edge of the group, arms crossed tight across his chest. Carla entered last, wiping her hands on a receipt printout. Her gaze landed on Malcolm, and for just a second, something flickered in her eyes, understanding. Malcolm stood at the front. No podium, no script, just presence. Good afternoon, he said. His voice was low, firm, and unhurried, like someone who had waited long enough. For those who don't know me, my name is Malcolm Reid. I'm the founder and CEO of Living Well. The room froze. Air stalled mid-breath. And today, I walked through this store as a customer, not a boss, not a nameplate, just a man. He let that truth settle like dust on still furniture. And I saw exactly what I needed to see. No one moved. The room was packed, but it felt hollow, like everyone had instinctively taken one step back from their own comfort. Malcolm didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I saw two versions of this store today, he began. One, where a white couple was offered help before they even asked. Smiles. Recommendations. Kindness. He paused, looked around the room, letting his gaze land briefly, but clearly on the two young men near the back. And then there was the version I experienced. He spoke of the electronics counter, the disinterest, the brush-off, the shrug. He recounted the laughter he overheard in the kitchen aisle, word for word. The employees shifted, some looking down, others glancing at each other. No one interrupted. He turned his attention to Carla. And then I met someone who reminded me why I started this company. Carla didn't know who I was. She didn't have to. She just treated me like I mattered. Carla's eyes blinked slowly, but she said nothing, just stood straighter. Malcolm looked back to the group. This isn't about catching anyone. It's not about punishment. It's about truth. His tone was calm, even gentle now. But beneath it was a clarity that cut deeper than blame. Culture isn't what's written on the wall. It's how you act when no one's watching. A pause. And today, I watched. Silence fell again, but it wasn't awkward. It was the sound of reflection, of reckoning. Because in that moment, every person in that room knew the boss hadn't come to scold. He'd come to see, and now that he had, things would not stay the same. Malcolm stood in front of the gathered staff, arms relaxed at his sides, the silence still folding gently around his final words. He let them breathe in what had been said, let the discomfort do its quiet work. Then he spoke again. I didn't come here to embarrass anyone, he said, voice even, and I'm not here to fire people on the spot. A few shoulders released tension, but Malcolm's next words stopped any relief from settling. But I'm also not leaving things as they are. He paced once slowly, deliberately, not as a performance, but as a man grounding his next steps. Starting this month, every store in this company, including this one, will undergo mandatory training on bias, empathy, and customer care. Not the check-a-box kind, real training, real conversations. No one spoke. Some of you may be thinking, that's not my issue. But that's exactly the point. Culture isn't built by the worst of us. It's allowed by the silence of the best of us. He paused, eyes scanning the room. If you've ever watched someone be treated differently and said nothing, This is your moment to decide who you are inside this uniform. He didn't scold. He didn't threaten. But in that space, surrounded by quiet stares and cooling coffee cups, his words hung like a mirror, not accusing, but waiting. I'm not here to punish. He stepped forward, calm as ever. I'm here to restore. The room was still. Eyes fixed. No scrolling. No whispers. Just a kind of stillness that only comes when people realize the rules have shifted and the old ways won't hold. Malcolm took a breath, steady as the weight in his voice. I'll be visiting more stores like this, he said, unannounced, alone, no entourage, no fanfare. A few heads tilted surprise, maybe unease. This isn't about catching anyone off guard. It's about connection, about truth. He let that hang for a beat before continuing. I started living well because I was tired of walking into stores where people like me were seen as suspicious, or invisible, or less. His eyes moved across the room, not accusing, but honest. I built this place so no one black, brown, young, old, dressed down would feel that again, and if we've lost that, then we've lost what matters most. He stepped toward Brian, who stood silently at the side, absorbing every word. From this point forward, Malcolm said, every store will have a private, anonymous feedback system for customers and employees. If something's wrong, I want to know. If someone's being mistreated by leadership, by coworkers, by customers, I want that truth to find daylight. Several employees exchanged glances, the kind of glances that meant finally. We can't fix what we pretend not to see, he added, and I refuse to lead from a distance anymore. Then, softer, almost like a reminder to himself, silence may protect comfort, but it never protects justice. Malcolm stepped back from the center of the room, not retreating, but grounding. The staff stood quiet, no longer defensive, not yet transformed, but undeniably shaken, in a way that meant change had entered the building and wasn't leaving. He looked to the faces nearest him, the tired cashier, the unsure stock boy, the young woman adjusting her sleeves in the corner as if trying to shrink her presence. Then he looked toward Carla. I want to thank one person, he said, his voice now softer, measured like something personal. Carla, you didn't know who I was. You didn't care. You looked me in the eye and spoke to me like I belonged here. Carla straightened, caught between humility and quiet pride. I just try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated, she said plainly. Malcolm nodded. That's the only standard that ever mattered. He turned to the room once more. I'm not expecting perfection, but I am demanding consistency. We can't claim to be a better brand, a fairer company, if our values change with the customer's skin tone or sneakers. He let that sink in, then added, I started this business with 3 people and a borrowed van. I didn't build it to be big. I built it to be right. His gaze moved, calm but firm. You don't have to be perfect to stay here, but you do have to care. With that, he gave a small nod, not a dismissal, but a passing of the torch. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was charged like the air before something new begins. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Malcolm stepped back into the sunlight, the late afternoon heat brushing against his face like breath from another world, warmer, louder, but no longer untouched. The store behind him looked the same glass, same clean logo, but it felt different now, like it had been cracked open, not broken, but exposed. He crossed the parking lot slowly, not because he was tired, but because the weight he carried wasn't something speed could outrun. Back in the car, the leather seat groaned beneath him. He didn't start the engine. He just sat. This wasn't triumph. This wasn't closure. It was something more uncomfortable, reckoning. He reached for the rearview mirror again, just like that morning, but this time, the face staring back didn't look like a disguise. It looked like the man who had built something worth protecting, and almost let it slip through his fingers. He thought of the early days, driving hours to hand-deliver bar stools, printing sale flyers from his kitchen table, shaking hands with customers like every one of them was family. Somewhere along the way, Success had stretched that connection thin. He hadn't become arrogant, but maybe he had become distant. He whispered to the silence, never again. Not because of pride, but because silence, his own silence, had nearly allowed a culture to grow that didn't reflect the man he was, or the name he carried. The notebook was still there, resting on the passenger seat like it had been waiting for him to return, not to add more grievances, but to write a different kind of entry. Malcolm picked it up and flipped past the pages he'd filled earlier that day. Observations, incidents, names, frustrations. He stopped at a blank page. The silence around him deepened. At the top, he wrote what we forgot. He let the words settle, then began. Customers are not data points. They are people, with stories. Culture cannot be assumed. It must be nurtured daily. Proximity matters. If I'm not close enough to feel the pulse, I'm too far to lead. He paused, then underlined the last point twice. Malcolm realized something that stung not because it was cruel, but because it was true. Success had made him careful, but careful wasn't the same as connected. He had built policies, infrastructure, HR pipelines, all necessary. But what he hadn't built in years was presence. And culture, he now saw, wasn't protected by systems. It was protected by people who believe someone is watching and someone cares. He leaned back in his seat and looked at the store one last time. He didn't see shelves or profits. He saw faces, conversations, quiet moments that revealed everything. And in that moment, he made a vow. He wouldn't just audit stores. He would walk with them, again. The next morning, Malcolm arrived at headquarters before the sun had fully climbed the skyline. The city was still quiet, but his steps were not. No assistant, no latte, no small talk. He walked straight into the conference room, glass walls, polished wood, the kind of space where decisions got made and forgotten in the same breath. But not today. He stood at the head of the long table and looked at the empty chairs, 10 in total, each usually occupied by a regional director, HR lead, or senior manager. Names with influence, titles with reach. He sent the group text himself. 10:00 a.m. meeting, no agenda, just truth. By the hour, they arrived, some with laptops, some with confusion, others with the slight stiffness of people sensing a storm. When everyone had settled, Malcolm didn't begin with slides. He didn't begin with metrics. He began with a story. I walked into our Peachtree store yesterday, he said plainly. No name tag, no warning. Just a man looking to be treated like a person. He told them what happened, not with fire, but with precision. Descriptions that couldn't be softened. Phrases he heard with his own ears. No one interrupted. Then, he leaned forward, palms resting on the table's edge. This wasn't an isolated incident. It's a mirror. One we've been too comfortable avoiding. He looked at each of them not as staff, but as stewards. I don't need loyalty to my position. I need loyalty to our purpose. And just like that, the tone of leadership changed. Because now, accountability wasn't delegated. It was shared. It had only been 24 hours. But when the employees of the Peachtree Livingwell store clocked in the next day, something in the air felt off. Or maybe awake was the better word. They moved more carefully now, not out of fear, but awareness. The kind that follows being seen. The electronics clerk, Denny, showed up 10 minutes early. Hair brushed, phone tucked away. He wiped down the counter without being asked. Said good morning to a customer without being prompted. It came out awkward, forced, but it came out. In the kitchen aisle, the two young men, Todd and Lucas, kept their jokes to themselves. They stocked quietly, methodically, no snickering, no assumptions, only glances between them, as if trying to figure out when everything had changed. But the biggest shift wasn't in their tasks. It was in their posture. Not slouching, not slinking, but unsure. Across the floor, Carla worked like always, calm, steady, efficient. But when she passed Denny at the water station, he looked up and gave a short nod. No words. just acknowledgement. She returned the nod, slow and measured, not a welcome, not a forgiveness. Just "I see you, too." Brian, the store manager, spent most of the morning not in his office, but on the floor, greeting customers, observing, asking small questions that felt strangely new. No one said Malcolm's name, but he was everywhere in the silence between coworkers, in the extra second someone held a door, in the way eye contact lasted just a beat longer than usual. Something had cracked, and light was starting to slip in. It started small. A young black man, maybe 19, walked into the store just after noon, backpack slung low, hoodie sleeves pushed to his elbows, earbuds tucked in but not playing anything. He moved slowly, eyes scanning the shelves like he wasn't sure what he needed yet or if he was even welcome to find it. 2 weeks ago, no one would have noticed. Or worse, they would have noticed, for the wrong reasons. But today, Carla saw him first. She didn't rush over, didn't shadow him. She simply offered a nod as he passed, the same way she would with anyone else. A small flicker of respect, of neutrality. Then came the test. He reached the electronics counter, same spot where Malcolm had once stood invisible, and paused in front of a mid-range speaker. He turned it in his hands, inspecting the box like he had questions but wasn't ready to ask. Denny stood behind the counter. He hesitated for half a second, then put down the inventory list he was reviewing, stepped out from behind the register, and said clearly, but calmly, "Hey, man, you need help with anything?" The young man blinked, surprised. Yeah. I was wondering if this connects to Bluetooth on older phones." Denny didn't sigh, didn't shrug. Instead, he took the box gently and said, "Let's check it together." They leaned in, side by side, reading specs. A conversation began. Brief, normal. But in that moment, the culture shifted by 1 inch. And in the architecture of change, 1 inch is everything. From the front register, Carla watched. Not with suspicion, not with judgment, but with a kind of knowing, the way elders watch a garden after the first hard rain, looking not for blooms, but for what survived. She saw Denny pointing to the box, explaining something. The young man nodded, laughed once, then walked off with the speaker in hand, not looking over his shoulder, not shrinking, just comfortable. Carla didn't smile. She simply exhaled. Behind her, Brian was standing by the seasonal decor aisle, clipboard in one hand, but not looking at it. He, too, had seen the interaction, had watched it unfold like a moment that once would have gone sideways, now moving forward instead. He approached Carla slowly, not as a boss, but as someone seeking confirmation. "That kid," he said quietly. "Did you notice the change?" Carla didn't look up, just kept scanning a candle set. "Yep." Brian hesitated. "Think it'll stick?" She did look at him, then steady, not unkind. "Depends," she said. "If they're doing it because they know they're being watched, it won't last. But if someone made them feel what it's like to be dismissed..." She let the sentence drift. Brian nodded, not because he fully understood, but because he wanted to. They stood in silence for a moment. No announcements, no banners. Just a flicker of something quieter than policy, but stronger than rules. Consciousness. And in that quiet, Carla thought, maybe change doesn't roar. Maybe it learns to whisper and gets heard anyway. 3 days later, Malcolm pulled into the same parking lot, same time of day, same weather, same everything. Except him. He wasn't undercover anymore. No ball cap, no plain t-shirt. Today he wore a crisp Oxford shirt, sleeves rolled, no jacket, no pretense, just presence. He stepped out of the car not like a man trying to blend in, but like someone who had been seen and had chosen to return anyway. Inside, the store was steady, not perfect, not polished, but different. There was a rhythm now, not choreographed, but intentional. Hellos were spoken where there used to be silence. Eyes met eyes. Aisles weren't patrolled, but maintained with care. The shift wasn't dramatic, but it was undeniable. Malcolm didn't need a tour. He walked alone past the rugs, the cookware, the outdoor displays half-stocked for summer. He stopped to chat with a customer near the throw pillows, asked how her experience had been. She smiled, said she'd just received help from a polite young man who didn't make her feel rushed. He nodded slowly, and then he made his way to the break room. No meeting had been scheduled, no announcement made. But when Malcolm walked through the back hallway, a few heads turned. Carla looked up from the staff bulletin board. Brian stood from where he'd been reviewing the delivery schedule. Malcolm gave a slight smile, hands still at his sides. "Don't worry," he said. "I didn't come to talk." He looked around the room at faces that were learning to see again. "I came to listen." Malcolm sat down at the corner of the break room table, not at the head, not in the center, just enough to be present, but not to command. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It was hesitant, like a room full of people testing the temperature of water they'd only ever been burned by. Brian sat beside him. Carla leaned back against the fridge, arms folded, not guarded, just waiting. Then, a voice spoke. It was Alicia, the youngest cashier, barely 20. Soft voice, quick hands. She glanced down at her cuticles as she spoke. "I used to think we weren't supposed to talk about stuff like this," she said. "Like if a customer was rude, or someone made a comment, we just had to suck it up and smile." No one interrupted. Todd, one of the two young men from the kitchen aisle, shifted in his chair, cleared his throat. "I said things I wouldn't want my mother to hear," he admitted, eyes low. "I didn't think it mattered. I thought it was just joking around." Carla didn't move, but her expression softened just a little. Then Brian spoke. "I thought being neutral was enough," he said quietly, "treating everyone the same. But I guess when you ignore the differences, you also ignore the damage." Malcolm said nothing, just nodded, because they were speaking truths now, not rehearsed, not curated, just raw, and in a company where silence once protected the wrong things. This was the first time it felt like the right silence had finally been broken. The conversation drifted naturally. No one passed around talking points. No one took minutes. It was the kind of gathering that couldn't be scheduled, it had to be earned. Malcolm listened, really listened. He watched as stories surfaced, small ones, often dismissed in fast-paced workdays, a black teen mistaken for a shoplifter, a Latina mother ignored in the returns line, a white employee who once spoke up and was told to just focus on sales. None of the stories were new. What was new was that they were finally being said out loud. After a while, Malcolm stood, no dramatic shift in tone, no grand conclusion. He simply looked at them, not as a boss surveying his team, but as a man seeing people he had once trusted and was learning to trust again. "I don't expect you to change overnight," he said. "I just expect you to remember that how we treat people is the business." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small cardboard box. Inside were pins, matte black, round, simple. Across the front, white letters read, "Seen, heard, human." He placed the box on the break room counter without fanfare. "No one has to wear one," he said, "but if you do, let it mean something." Then he turned, nodded once to Carla, once to Brian, and walked out. No applause followed. But as the door shut behind him, someone no one saw who reached into the box and took a pin. By the end of the week, something strange began to happen. At a Living Well store 2 states over in Jackson, Mississippi, the floor manager walked into the staff lounge and found a cashier pinning a black circle to her apron. "Where'd you get that?" he asked. She shrugged. "Mailroom. Said it came from corporate." Across the front, in small bold letters, it read, "Seen, heard, human." By Monday, 2 more employees were wearing it. By Wednesday, it was 10. No memo had been sent, no company-wide campaign announced. Just a box, a phrase, a choice. Back at Peachtree, Carla noticed it first, a family of 4, black and brown, walking into the store. The father paused near the entrance, clocked the pins on both Brian and Denny's shirts, and whispered something to his wife. They didn't smile. They didn't stop. But they walked farther into the store than they might have before. By that afternoon, 3 customers had asked about the pins. What does it mean? Is that some kind of new brand? Are y'all part of a movement? No one had a script. Each employee gave their own version. It's just a reminder to treat people like people, because some of us forget sometimes. Not every staff member wore one. Not every customer noticed. But a few did, and a few became more. And for the first time, the store wasn't just reacting to Malcolm's presence. It was becoming something in his absence. It was nearly 6:30 p.m. when Malcolm's phone buzzed a quiet vibration against the wood of his kitchen counter. He'd been making tea, the good kind, loose leaf, a ritual he only returned to when something in him needed grounding. The name on the screen read Carla H. He picked up, voice calm, Carla. There was a pause, then a familiar warmth. Hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. She hesitated. I thought maybe you'd want to know about the pins. Malcolm said nothing at first, just leaned against the counter. They're wearing them, she continued. Not all of them, but some, even Denny. And not because they're told to, they just are. A breath, then something gentler, and I think they mean it. Malcolm smiled, softly, unseen. That's good to hear, he said. I didn't want to force anything. You didn't, Carla replied. You just reminded us what had been lost. Another pause. I've been here 10 years, Mr. Reid, seen managers come and go, policies change, people pretend. Her voice lowered. But I've never seen someone walk in, say the truth, and leave space for the rest of us to choose who we want to be. Malcolm felt something settle in his chest, not pride, something quieter. Thank you, he said, not just for today, for being the kind of person this place was meant for. Carla chuckled. I didn't do much. He shook his head, even though she couldn't see. You stayed, he said. And sometimes that's the bravest thing of all. Later that night, long after the conversation with Carla had ended, Malcolm stood alone in his home office. The lights were low. Outside the window, the city was breathing traffic thinned, night settling across rooftops like a blanket. In the quiet, he opened the drawer of his desk and pulled out the original Living Well business card. The first one he ever printed. It was cheap stock, faded edges, but the name Malcolm Reid, owner, was still there. He turned it over. In faint handwriting, years old, barely legible. Make people feel at home even when they're not. He closed his eyes. That line, that promise. Somewhere along the way, it had gotten buried beneath quarterly reports, expansion meetings, and leadership charts. But maybe now, maybe just now, it was surfacing again. He placed the card on the desk beside a single black pin. Seen, heard, human. Then he did something simple. He walked to the front door of his house, opened it slowly, and stepped outside barefoot. Cool night air wrapped around him like memory. He looked up, not for signs, not for meaning, just for stillness. And in the hush of that moment, he didn't need applause or headlines. Because he knew he'd started something, not perfect, not loud, but real. And if it held, if it grew, it would be because someone cared enough to wear the pin, even when no one was watching. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.